This is the first video in the Using the Concord Suite series. This video is Concord Forms Designer, creating a form using the Easy Form Design Wizard. The next video in the series is Concord Forms Designer, modifying a form created in the Easy Form Design Wizard. Before we get started, I'd like to mention at the beginning of each video where to find the documentation. To find the Concord Documentation, start the Concord software and click on Help and Concord Documentation. In the window that comes up, first of all, it will show you where the documentation is stored on the C drive under Program Files, then Data Blocks, then Concord 7.0, then Documentation. And you'll find a list here. There's some system requirements, a couple of quick guides for using the entire Concord suite, and the Concord User's Manual. And if I double click on this, it'll bring up the manual. On the left side is a list of bookmarks, so you can quickly move to different parts of the manual by clicking on those bookmarks. I will let you peruse that on your own, and we'll get started here. When trying to evaluate the Concord Forms Designer or learn to use the program, you might look at some of the sample forms included with all versions of Concord. And to do that, click on File and Open. And up here, once again, the folder where these sample files are stored is on the C drive, Program Files, then Data Blocks, Concord 7.0, and FSL. FSL is the extension of the form file that Concord saves. So all Concord files have an FSL extension, and you may be asked to send us that file if you call for support. So in that folder, I can look at some of the forms. We're going to look at 2 or 3 of them here. This is a standard conference evaluation, and the idea here is just to show you how different forms look. You have complete control using the Concord software how your form looks, but here is some examples of how some forms look. So there's a conference evaluation. Let's open another one. Let's try a patient survey. The patient survey is a multi-page survey. It has sheet 1 front and back and sheet 2 front and back, and it starts here with the beginning questions, and these are just standard multiple choice questions. And then if you want to look at other pages, you can click on Window and select sheet 1 back, and these are standard looking Likert style questions, which we'll be talking about in this video today. And then if you go to sheet 2 front, there are some other questions and some open-ended questions or comments type areas. And then if you go to the last sheet, there's another multiple choice question and then some demographic type questions. So once again, these are just examples, and I want to look at one more. Go to File and Open and look at, well, let's look at 2 more. Let's look at the Survey of Surveys. And this is just a quick survey. It has a few questions here. Multiple choice type questions. You can see with boxes and lines and text and shading, you can make your form look very different. And then down at the bottom here, we have what we call a 0 through 9 grid to pick up zip code. And then this is an image region, which we will be discussing today, that will pick up the email address. Okay, and a handwritten email address, that is. Okay, let's look at one more, and the one I want to look at is our Tourist Bureau survey. And the reason I want to look at this one, I just wanted to show you that here we have a date and then some printed information, and then down here we have what I call a 2-column form with shortened questions down the left side and then the continuation of questions down the right side. So you can see that there's a wide variation of how your form can look. Okay, and I just wanted to show you that a little bit, but I'm going to close all of these forms by clicking on the X for each page, and then we're going to start from scratch. So We are going to create a form using the Easy Form Design Wizard, and so you click on File and Easy Form Design Wizard, and this window comes up. At the top here it gives you some instructions, and then down here it poses two possible types of forms that you could design. This is a survey type form. This is the one we'll be working on today. This is a testing type of form, and the software will do either one. You can even mix and match if you have that need. But we are going to be skipping over the testing type form and concentrating on the survey type form today. And so we're going to click yes here. We do want to use the wizard, and here is the wizard. So what we have here is 6 tabs at the top, one for form properties, top fields you might want at the top of the form, then 3 types of questions, multiple choice, Likert style, and test responses, and then some fields at the bottom of the form. This first tab here is the form properties, and the first thing that software is asking you to is enter a name. So we might call this Easy Form Survey. This will be the name of the file that the form is saved into, and that would be the FSL file. So this is the name. You are required to put that in before you move on from this tab. So then we have some properties that describe the form as a whole. The first one is form color, and you have some basic colors here. These are all the colors that the software already has programmed into it, and we're going to select blue just to change the color a little bit. You can then select the font, and you'll notice that the font list is rather short. It's not like the full font list you're used to seeing in other software. The point of this is that your form you really shouldn't use script type or very fancy or hard to read fonts, because if your form is hard to read, then it won't be filled out as accurately, and therefore your data won't be as accurate. So we've selected some standard fonts that you'll also find on any Windows computer, and so we're just going to leave Arial because that's the font I like to use. It's simple, it's easy to read. Then you can select the response shape between circles, ovals, and squares. Unless you are really enamored with squares, we don't recommend you use them, and the reason is very simple. People tend to X and check squares as opposed to filling them in completely, and that can cause scanning problems. One of the reasons is when people tend to make X's and checks, they make long tails, and the tails can run into the question above or below and cause scanning problems, whereas circles and ovals, people tend to fill in just the circle and oval and fill it in more completely, which is better for scanning. So we're just going to leave it circle. Form orientation, you can create portrait or landscape forms. We're going to leave ours portrait. You can also create one-sided or two-sided forms. Two-sided is the standard. Most scanners these days will scan both sides of the paper at the same time, so there's no need for single-sided forms in most cases. Notice that I didn't change very much here. I added my form name, I changed the color, and I left everything else as the default. Okay, so once we've set up the form properties, we're going to talk about what we want to put on our form. And we're going to click on the first tab here, top of the form, and we're going to add some things that we might want at the top of our form. Now in these entry boxes, you can either type in information or you can cut and paste. We will be doing some of both. But to begin with, I'm just going to type into this title text. So this is the title of my form, but it will be placed at the top. So I'm just going to call it Easy Form Survey. Whoops, a little misspelling there. And then if I wanted a second line of text under my first line of title text, I could add that here, but I'm going to skip that. We are going to go down here to our logo and our graphic, and we're going to add our logo to the form. That's a common thing to do to a form, is to add your logo. There's one of our logos, but I want this one down here. And I'm just going to say, and this is a bitmap file. The software will only open bitmap files. Okay, so I'm going to click on that here, and it puts the bitmap file in here along with the path name where it's stored. And then I can set it to left side, middle, or right side. I'm going to leave it on the left side so you can control where the logo is on your form, and if you put it in the middle of the form, the software will automatically move your titles to the left. Okay, so to keep them away from the logo. So then we're going to add a few of these things down here to our form. And I am going to add a date field. Once again, these fields are optional. It's up to you whether you add them or not, but we're going to go ahead and add some of these fields just for illustration. And so we're going to add a date field in the standard American date pattern. And then we're going to add a 0 through 9 field. Now a 0 through 9 grid will pick up something like an ID number or a date. It can pick up a zip code, those kinds of things. You can change the number of columns. I'm going to say that my ID is just 6 characters long, and I'm going to leave, you can change the heading text here if you wanted this to say student ID or some other type of number here. You could put that in here. I'm going to leave it as the default, leave it as 6 columns. We are going to skip name field. This is a non-scannable area where a young student might write in their name for a test. So we're going to skip that, but we are going to add our fill in the bubbles completely section. This is a little box that will appear that tells people how to fill in the bubbles, and you'll see this when we generate the form. And I'm going to say use pen or pencil, add this text into it, because you can use pen or pencil to fill out forms that are created in Concord and scanned in the Remark Office software. Then down here, I might want to add a paragraph of instructions. This is very common in survey forms, just to welcome people to the survey and give them instructions as to how to fill it out. And I could type in instructions into this box, or I can cut and paste, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to be doing some cut and pasting from this Word file here. And I'm going to just grab this paragraph here. This is a set of instructions that I want. And I'm going to go up here and copy it into the paste buffer, go back to Concord, and then here I can press Control V, which is the standard Windows paste command, and I can paste that group of instructions. So you can type your text in other software, and often you already have text like instructions and questions and things like that in other software. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible to move that text over into the Concord software. And then down here at the bottom, because this is a scan form, the software keeps up with how much of the page you've used by the number of scan rows. There's 42 possible scan rows on this scan form, and we've used about half of them for the front of the form. This number will continue to increment as we use more of the form. So this is all the fields I might want on the top of my form. And so we're ready to move on to one of the next tabs. So we're going to move on. We're going to add some multiple choice questions and Likert style questions to our form. And I'm going to click here on multiple choice questions. The software does give you some ability to adjust how the form looks. And if I wanted to force this question to the top of the next page for some reason, I can do that. I can also put some instructions or a heading above this section of questions. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to just call this something simple like, whoops, I meant to be caps, demographic questions. Okay, and then I'm going to add 3 or 2 actually multiple choice questions here. And once again, I can type directly into these boxes here, but I can also cut and paste, and I'm going to do that. And we're going to do this to speed things up a little bit and make sure that we move along here. So we've got a few simple multiple choice questions, and I'm going to grab this one here, and I'm going to grab both the question text and the possible answers all at once. And this is just a quick speed trick to move our illustration along here. I'm going to click here. When I press Control V, which is the paste command, oops, I didn't do something here. I selected the question, but I didn't go up here and copy it into the paste buffer. So that's now done. Go back to Concord, and I press Control V, and it pastes just the first line, which is the question here, because I only have a 1-line box. Then down here, when I press Control V, it pastes both the question and the possible answers. Well, I don't want the question in here, so I'm going to do a little trickery here, just a little copy and paste. If I select those and press Control X, it will delete them and put them in the paste buffer, and then Control V, and it will paste over that question. So this is just a quick little pasting trick to move things along a little faster. And then now that I've done multiple choice question 1, I'm going to click on next question, and it clears the screen and lets me enter the next question. So we're going to go do that, back over to our file here, and we're going to grab this question exactly the same way we did the last one. Remember this time to paste it into the buffer, and then Control V, click down here, Control V, select these, Control X, which cuts them, Control V, paste them back. Okay. Now I could continue to add questions by clicking here, but we're going to move on. That's all there is to entering questions, multiple choice questions, and let's go on to Likert style questions. So here, once again, we can put this group at the top of the next page if for some reason we want to leave some space at the bottom of the page. We can add some instructions above this group, and I'm going to do that. People often add just a word of instructions like please rate each of the following. Okay. And then we're going to add some questions and then the possible answers for our Likert style questions. Okay. And if you're not familiar with Likert style questions, they are questions where a group of questions have the same answers, often something like a range from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So back over here to our paste buffer, to our Word document, we're going to scroll down a little bit, and we're going to grab this set of questions right out of this table. So here's 16 questions, and we're going to paste them into the paste buffer, copy them into the paste buffer, go back to Concord, click here, and I can either Control V. You can also, in this box, you can right click, hit your right mouse button and say paste from the clipboard, and it pasted in all 16 questions into my question text. So once again, this stops you from having to retype all of these things. So then I'm going to go over here to labels. Labels are the possible answers, and I'm going to go back to my Word document, and I'm going to scroll up just a little bit if I can get something out of the way here. There we are. And I'm going to grab my answers, strongly agree to strongly disagree. I'm not going to grab the not applicable answer. So we're just going to set a 5-point scale, strongly agree to strongly disagree. I'm going to copy them into the paste buffer, back to Concord, right click, paste from the clipboard, and there are my possible labels. Okay. Now there are some properties that I can change for each group of Likert style questions. I can change the number of lines between the questions. If you have one in here, the questions will be one right on top of the other. If you make this 2, then you'll have a blank space in between each question. That's what we're going to do. I can tell it to shade alternate rows, which is what we're going to do. It helps the user of the form to read it and to answer, to make sure they're marking in the proper bubbles. And I'm going to say shade across the response area, and I'll discuss that a little bit when we generate the form, what the purpose of that is. And then I'm going to tell it to number these questions. Since I don't have numbers on my questions, I can turn this on or off, but I'm going to leave it on, and we're going to start this group at 1. And then if I wanted to add more groups, I can click on Next Group. The software is telling me here that we've gone on to 2 pages, and you can see that down here. We've used up 28 rows of the second page. Okay, so we've moved on to 2 pages. And because this is a 2-sided form, we'll have a sheet 1 front and a sheet 1 back. But we're only going to enter that one section of Likert style questions, and we're now going to move on. We're going to skip test responses because this is for that testing type form, and we're not doing that kind of form, so we don't have any use for this tab. So once again, these tabs are, you only need to use what you need. We are going to add some things to the bottom. This is an area where you can add an open-ended question or a comments type area, and we're going to click on that. and you can change what it says here, and I'm going to do that. You might want to say something like, please tell us what you think of our conference, or something along that line. And it will label this comments area. Now this one defaults to 4 lines, excuse me. I'm going to make it 6. And then we're going to add a footer text. This is just a line of text at the bottom of your form, and you might say something like, thank you for taking our survey. You might also add another line. If you were sending this out to the general public, you might put your address down here, mail to, just to make sure that people know where to send it. Okay, so that is all we really want to put on our form. So we're ready to generate the form. You can move back and forth on these tabs and change things. And after you've generated the form, you can come back in here and modify the form further. So there's no real harm in generating the form right now, because you can regenerate it as many times as you need to. We're going to click OK here, and we're going to get this window that tells us it's ready to generate, and we're going to say yes. And the software, you can see back here, it's generated our form, and now it's asking us to save it. And it's just making sure that you're saving it under the name that you gave it before and where you're saving it. In a lot of cases, you will not be allowed to save forms under Program Files, Data Blocks, Concord 7.0 FSL, because you won't have permission. Most users don't have permission to save forms under Program Files. So you might move back up to your libraries area or your personal area and create a different folder to put them in. And what I usually do is create a folder by clicking on this create folder icon, and then call it Concord Forms, and then move in there, and there's nothing in here, and that's where we'll save our form. Okay, so we have saved it in a folder under my personal area, Concord Forms. And the file that we saved is easyformsurvey with an FSL extension. It's important to know these extensions, because if you call us for help, we will sometimes ask you to send us different files, and each file extension describes what's in the file. In this case, it's a Concord form file, but there are other files associated with the Concord suite. Okay, so we are looking at the back of the form, but let's click on the front and let's see what the software generated for us. Okay, it created a form with the title that we mentioned, that we typed in. It added our logo for us. It then added these areas to the top of the form. The ID number that was 6 columns wide, that's what we asked for. It added the date field over here on the right with the month, day, and year, just a 2-digit year. And then it added our set of instructions here. And then it added our fill in the bubbles completely section and added the text use pen or pencil. But you can see what this box is for. It tells people the correct way is to fill in the bubbles completely. Don't X them, don't partially fill them in, and don't check them. Okay, now I do want to be clear. The Remark Office software will often read marks like this, but it's better if you can get users to fill in marks like this. It's just the form will scan better the better mark that you have. It's just that simple. So those are all the fields that we told it to put at the top of the form, and then we asked it to add some demographic questions. 2 of them: what's your favorite color and how far did you travel to attend this conference? And you can see it added our answers or labels next to a bubble so that people can fill these in. And then it started our group of Likert style questions. It added the first 5, put in our line of instruction text, put in our labels over here, and then it shaded every other row, and it extended the shade across the bubble area. And the reason you have a choice whether to do this or not, if you're going to use a copy machine to copy these forms, it's often a good idea not to extend the shade across the bubble areas. If the shade is too dark, it would interfere with the scanning of this bubble area. And copiers often make even very light shading, and if I click here, you can see up here the shading is only 10% blue. It's a very light shade color, but copy machines often darken the shade very badly, and that can interfere with the scanning of the form. So that's the reason there's a choice as to whether to extend it across the bubble area. But you can see we've got 5 questions here, and then it ran out of room. So we move on to the back side, and it finished with questions 6 through 16. Wrote the labels so that the user wouldn't get confused as to what they're filling in, and finished up with the shading. Then those were our 2 types of questions, multiple choice and Likert, and our last area is our our comments area. I'm going to move this blue box, this top blue box, off for just a minute, and we're going to just talk about a couple things here, and then I'll talk about this blue box. The software created a box with 6 lines in it, which is what we told it to do, and then added the text for our comments area. Okay, and then it added our 2 lines of footer text. Now, what is this blue box then that was covering this whole area? Okay, this is an image region. Okay, the software, when it goes to create the scan template, which will be described in another video, knows that bubble areas are scannable areas. Well, the Remark Office software can also scan these kinds of comments areas, and it does that with an image region. That's what this blue box with the diagonal lines represents. You put an image region over that area, and it will separate this part of the image of this page into a separate file, and you can gather those little files together onto a report in the Remark Office software, and thereby get a report of all the handwritten comments, and that report can be turned into an electronic document like a PDF file and emailed to the person who needs to read the comments. So the idea of an image region is that you can create some sort of comments report that will stop you from having to flip through the forms, the actual paper forms, to read the comments. So that's the purpose of an image region. An image region is a scannable area, as are the bubble areas. Okay, we'll talk about scanning this form in the next video, which is well, actually in the 3rd video. The next video will be about modifying this form after it's been created using the wizard. But let's talk just a little bit further about the wizard. Okay, I had this field selected, and I clicked off in the white space to bring up this object bar, and there's a button here, and you can also see the same thing on the file menu. Go back to the Easy Form Wizard. We can click on this button, and it will, if there's anything that's been changed, it will give us this warning. And the reason it gives you that warning, if you make any changes in the full Forms Designer, they will not be reflected when you regenerate the form. So the idea is that you make all the changes you want to in the wizard, and then if you want to make any hand changes, which is what the next video is about, in the full Forms Designer, you can make those after you've finished with the wizard. But we're going to say yes and continue, and it pulls us back into the wizard. And you can see these are all the things that we've added, and we can add and modify things here. So if I wanted to add, let's say, a second line of title, let's say for some reason I wanted to say this was the Atlanta conference, and the date of the conference was 10/31/2013. Okay, and so I can add that, and when it regenerates the form, it will add this. Okay, and any changes that I make will be added or removed from the form if I wanted to take some things out. And just as an example, I'm going to take out the add the fill in the bubbles completely section, and it'll remove that section. There's also something else you can do. You can, if you go to the Form Properties tab or the bottom of the Form tab, you will find this button here at the very bottom, change the order of the question groups. And so if I wanted to change the order of the question groups, These are the question groups. I have two multiple choice questions and a Likert style question. I'm sorry, a group of Likert style questions. Let's say I wanted this multiple choice question, then I wanted the Likert style questions, then I wanted to see this multiple choice question. I can move the Likert style question by clicking on it and dragging it. And this is just the physical order that they're going to appear on the form. So now I'm going to see multiple choice question 1, the Likert questions, and then I will see the multiple choice question 2. So this is just a list of the question groups, and you can change the order. And you just do that once again by clicking on a question group or question and left click and drag it into the proper physical position. That's all there is to this. Some little instructions here. When I click OK, then goes back to this screen, and then I can regenerate the form by clicking OK, and that's what I'm going to do. Okay, and let's go see what happened. Okay, first of all, our box that had the fill in the bubbles completely section disappeared. Our second line of title did appear, and then we can see that what happened was we now have the first question, then the Likert style questions, and it changed the order. We've got now 7 of these on this page, and if I go to the back, we now have 8 through 16 on the back, and then the second question, and then our bottom of the form fields again. Okay, so that is how you manipulate a form using create a form using the Easy Form Wizard, and then you can modify it by going back into the wizard. And you can do this as many times as you want. I'm going to go back in here, go to the top of the form. I'm going to put our section back in here and our add use pen or pencil, and I'm going to click OK, and it will regenerate the form. Okay, and it put back in our fill in the bubbles completely section. So it regenerates the form every time you go in and out of the Easy Form Design Wizard. But that is how you create a form using the Easy Form Design Wizard. This concludes this video, which is Concord Forms Designer creating a form using the Easy Form Design Wizard. The next video in the series, using the Concord Suite series, is Concord Forms Designer, modifying a form created in the Easy Form Design Wizard. Thank you for watching.